So the race started pretty well. I wanted to be at the front of wave 2 because I wasn't in wave 1, but I figured I would be near the in the faster group of wave 2, which started 30 minutes after wave 1. And because this entire race is basically on single track, if you get caught behind early, behind kind of slower runners, obviously that can just be kind of painful and it's sometimes a little more difficult to pass. So I started near the front, and the beginning of the race has a few miles on pavement, and then kind of hard packed fire road. And that actually helped string out the race pretty well. And so I went out, and the plan was to make sure I was going no faster than 8-minute pace, ideally a little bit slower. The beginning was a little bit of downhill and then actually went uphill, so that actually slowed me down, and I did a good job letting people pass. I was like, let people go out. Everyone says that at this race, everyone goes out too hard in the first 20 miles, which are net downhill, and then blow up their quads. And so I was being conservative, making sure I could talk to people around me. A couple of you recognized me and chatted for a little bit, and so I was pretty reserved and felt good. By the time we hit kind of the crux of the Black Canyon Trail, things were clicking. I was feeling good. I was, running, breathing was in check, eating. It was going really well. Didn't use the first aid station, didn't need to, 7 miles in. Used the next aid station, which was, I think, around mile 12 and a bit, for just 1 bottle refill. So got a bottle refilled, kept running, going really well. By the time I hit Bumblebee Ranch, which is just after mile 19, 19.2, I was feeling really good. I was eating well, everything was going to plan, legs felt good. I mean, they didn't feel great. I mean, 20 miles is a lot of mileage anyway, but they felt like they could withstand a lot more. So I was really happy. It was starting to heat up significantly. And so it was probably only in the 60s, high 60s at this point, but the sun was out, there was no cloud cover, so you could feel it. And so I planned with my crew that if it looked like it was gonna be a hotter day, or at least the sun was out, we were gonna start doing kind of heat management immediately in Bumblebee Ranch. And so we'd planned for that. We'd planned for an ice pack, a different hat, etc. Some of you might be wondering, why didn't you just assume that this was going to be the case? Well, the 2 weeks before, when I'd run on the course, it actually been cloudy and super windy and cold. I never took off my long sleeve, and so the weather can change the needs on the course quite a bit. But it was warm, and so I was also at this point making sure I was drinking at least a bottle every 45 minutes, and then I was starting to bump that up even more. And so the plan, definitely past Bumblebee, was going to be a bottle every 30-ish minutes. And so I made sure that I had finished 3 bottles coming into Bumblebee Ranch. I was there a few minutes ahead of my schedule, just ahead of 3 hours. So I was doing really well on the pacing side, and I was doing well in the nutrition, etc. Bumblebee Ranch aid station was awesome, super efficient. I didn't try to rush it as much as I have kind of rushed through aid stations in 50Ks. I took it a little bit slower, made sure I got the ice bandana on, made sure I got some water, took 2 salt pills, and I'll talk about that in a second, changed hats, and then made sure I got completely doused with water, which was really, really important. So I left that aid station with more nutrition, 2 bottles, and completely soaking wet, which is exactly what you want for managing your heat. So that was a great aid station. Lene and the crew were awesome. It was perfect, and started running. So as soon as you come out of Bumblebee Ranch, you hit a climb. It's not very long of a climb, but it's kind of chunky rocks, and it's a good sign of what's to come. The course becomes extremely chunky, just like rocks everywhere, and it's just hard to get a rhythm. Climb went well. I was feeling fine. It was really, really exposed. I mean, the whole thing was really exposed, but especially this part. And being completely wet from the aid station was very, very helpful. So it's feeling good, continuing on. And after the climb, you kind of have this windy single track through this kind of canyon area for a few miles until you hit another aid station at Gloriana Mine. And I'd done this section again I'd done this 2 weeks before, and so I knew that this section was quite hard. It's technically kind of flat, but it doesn't feel like that. It's really difficult. It's super technical, but not like, you know, small drops or anything. It's just these rocks everywhere, and it's so twisty, curvy that it's so hard to get into a rhythm. And so I'd really struggled in my 20-mile run 2 weeks ago on that section. And again, like, I didn't think I struggled this much. I felt much better this time. So that was nice, but it's still difficult. Like, you just can't get into that rhythm that you would like. And right before Gloriana Mine, I started having a few signs that things were suddenly going wrong. I started taking a gel, and then for some reason had this like immense kind of stomach gag reflex that I was like, oh, I need to throw this gel up, which I've never had in a race. I don't have stomach issues, and it made no sense. I've practiced even higher carbs, as I've talked about in these videos, and so I wasn't really pushing that high. And so that was kind of a surprise. So I immediately backed off on the gels, and it was like, okay, I'll just drink. And hit the Gloriana Mine aid station, filled up one of my bottles. I just almost finished a bottle right before. I had a little bit left in the bottle, but I drank it a lot. And then filled up another bottle so that I would have 2 for the just over 10K, I think like 7-mile stretch from Gloriana Mine, which is at 24 miles, to the aid station halfway point, just past halfway, which is like 31.9 or something. But right after Gloriana Mine, I started having like stomach cramps, like really bad stomach cramps. And every time I was trying to run, it would hurt. And then if I stopped and walked a little bit, it felt a little better. Tried a little bit more gels. Again, that just felt awful on my stomach. Immediately wanted to throw them up. And so I went to just liquid, which still didn't feel great, but I kind of forced myself to keep drinking. Unfortunately, the Gloriana Mine aid station, the GU Octane they had was green tea flavored. None of the others had green tea flavor. They all had the typical like tropical punch or strawberry lemonade or whatever that flavor is. Or the last aid station had grape, which I'd never had before, but it's fine. But this one had green tea, which was awful. Just tasted awful. Like, I like green tea, just not in a race. It wasn't sweet at all. It was super bitter. You know, and I've used a lot of GU Octane. I was not expecting them to use such a strange flavor at one of these aid stations, but alas, I don't think that really mattered. I just didn't want to drink it, but I forced myself to drink it. But yeah, for the next 10K, I would like run for a bit and then walk for a bit, and just the stomach just hurt. It just felt like little knives just in the stomach. And that was really disappointing. I think that really hurt me mentally, kind of threw me off of my race big time. So that was very, very unfortunate. And yeah, I just kept trying to restart and I couldn't. So many people were passing me. It was very sad. The legs felt fine for the most part, but yeah, the stomach was bad. And then as I was kind of like doing this walk, I started noticing my hip flexors were just on fire. Just so tired, which might have just been in my head. Might have just been because I wasn't running. I was focusing on just everything that was going wrong. But for that section, I was really mentally in a bad spot. And so when I eventually get to Deep Canyon Ranch, I texted my crew ahead of time to be like, hey, I'm having problems, which they would have, realized because I was way behind schedule at this point. I was about an hour behind schedule. Get there and I'm running with my pacer. He kind of meets me as I come down the trailhead. I'm running with him in through the chute, kind of to where my crew is set up. And I'm like, I just don't know if I should keep doing this. Like, if I can't run, I don't want to walk the rest, the remaining 50K. That would be silly. That's not fun for anyone. I'd been thinking about the logistics for the rest of the day. I'm like, hey, we can go get a nice lunch and then dinner together. We could, Tim, you can go run somewhere else in Phoenix. And I'd kind of like done all the math on, maybe it's not so bad to quit on this one. And I just couldn't run. So 90% of me was like done. But in the 10% in the back of my head, I knew that the next aid station was about 5.5 miles past. It was the Black Canyon Trailhead. And I knew that section wasn't going to be crazy difficult, and I'd actually run on those trails about over a year ago, but I kind of knew them. And so my crew was very adamant that I needed to keep running, which is partially the purpose of a crew. And they were very supportive, got me ready, we kept going through the motions of what I needed to do before the next section. And so, Tim eventually was like, hey man, let's just try. And if you can't restart the stomach, then we can quit at Black Canyon Trailhead. The crew was going to keep their car near that trailhead, so I could always bail there if needed. So I was like, okay. And during this aid station, I started having a lot of Coca-Cola, which for those of you who run these ultra races or triathlons, Coca-Cola can be miracle. It's got obviously the sugar and the caffeine, which is helpful, but the syrupy nature of it has a settling agent for the stomach. It really settles your stomach, and that can really help in these long distance events, which sounds very counterintuitive to people who haven't had Coca-Cola in these kind of environments before, because the bubbly sounds terrible. But a lot of the Coca-Cola at these aid stations is flat by the time you drink it. So I had a lot of Coca-Cola, ice cold. I needed just to kind of get cooler. And yeah, got ready, put the ice pack back on, got the bottles and started running. And, kind of as a show of confidence or trying to make it seem better than it was, I ran out of the aid station with Tim. Like we just settled onto a decent gate. And so we start, running out, got some nice footage. It looks like I'm running and doing okay. And I'd actually run into the end of the aid station, but my stomach was still feeling bad. And so I'm running out. My stomach is, at this point, I haven't noticed anything. There's no reason for me to stop. And I'm kind of, let's just keep running. And then when it hurts, we'll take a little bit of a walk break. And it never hurt again. It's just kind of the issues dissipated. And I found myself running the entire section from Deep Canyon Ranch to Black Canyon Trailhead aid station and kept pushing the pace a little higher, getting closer to where I should have been, not quite where I should have been, but getting closer. And the section that has some hills, but ran the hills, felt really good, start passing people. And then I was kind of turning to Tim and being like, I think we can do this. And we never really had that conversation. He was just kind of checking in with me in a little bit, like, how are you doing? But he let me set the pace, which was great in the plan. And by the time we got to Black Canyon Trailhead, there was no conversation of whether we're stopping. We never debated it. We never talked about it. It never came up. The only thing we talked about was what do we need? What do each of us need to do at this aid station? So Tim was going to grab my ice bandana, fill it with ice. I was going to grab more Coca-Cola, maybe some watermelon, and we were going to get in there and get out. And unfortunately, they had no watermelon. There was only one person running that aid station. The poor guy who was so overwhelmed. He was trying his best to mix more Glutathione and direct people where to go. And so we asked him for watermelon, and he was like, I just haven't cut any for ages. And so the poor guy, thank you for whoever you were. Thank you for doing your best. I don't know why you were left on your own, but didn't get the watermelon, but I did get a bunch of Coca-Cola with a bunch of ice, which was amazing. And we got actually in there and out of there pretty quickly. And at this point, I had stopped doing goos, basically, because I wasn't sure what had happened with my stomach and why it was off, but I knew that liquid was okay. And so because, I'm still in a race environment, it's hot, and I'm, still pushing. I wasn't pushing the pace that I wanted to, but I was pushing. I knew I needed the carbs. I didn't need to bonk at this point, right? If you bonk, it was really, really hard to restart. And so I was really drinking a ton of liquid. So I'd finished a full bottle, two bottles, going into that aid station, I think, to make sure that I was getting a ton of calories just from the water, the drink mix. And then the Coca-Cola again at the aid station, I drank as much as I possibly could. And that, I think, again, helps settle the stomach, got some nice calories in there, got some nice caffeine, really nice. And we left the aid station. And again, I was starting to feel good, and started running. And the next section was tough. I had forgotten, because of all the issues, and my wife had to run to a different spot to grab the ice for the ice bandana. I'd forgotten to pack the third bottle, which was my plan for this section. So I was going to have an empty bottle with just some drink mix in it. I was going to pack that because after Black Canyon Trail, it's about an 8 or 9 mile section, but it's one of the bigger climbs on the course. I think it's 9 miles, and so that could take, the plan was an hour and a half. And so only having 2 full bottles with me for that section was not good. Unfortunately, it ended up being okay, but I kind of realized then, like, uh-oh. And so I started doing a little bit more eventually on the goos. So I started taking the precision gels again. I started realizing, okay, I'm fine. And so eventually kind of realized, okay, we're back in this. And I knew once we left Black Canyon Trailhead, we were finishing the race. And so at that point, my mindset was more about just kind of getting through the race, not about whether I was gonna, have these questions of quitting again. So it was pretty cool to see how you can mentally recover from starting so mentally kind of distraught to coming back and feeling good. And so we started running, and it was great. It wasn't fast. It wasn't as fast as I was hoping I could do at this point. I think because I had the issues earlier, I hadn't been feeling as much. So I think that had kind of zapped me a little bit. So I wasn't able to kind of push. And at this point also, I knew I was going to hit my time goal. So I kind of went and I think mentally went into a let's just finish mode. And also maybe hedging a little bit against any kind of issues that might come back up. But yeah, we started running and things were okay. We trying to move as much as we could. And I think the next problem that kind of popped up was with the feet, which was interesting and new for me. The course is so chunky, as I said. It's just, there's rocks everywhere. You have to really pay attention to every foot you place. And so you're just hammering on rocks the whole time. And it feels much harder than it should be. It never feels like it's a downhill course or anything. It's just like rocky and difficult. And a lot of other people will say this. There's a lot of other videos about the race from some pros and other amateurs. And basically what I think, my feet just started hurting. Like everything else was fine. My hip flexor problem that I was saying earlier just disappeared. No issues with the hip flexors, which was surprising. Maybe it's because I was running slower at this point. That's my theory, but they were fine. My legs muscles were fine. I was not having issues with that. I mean, they were tired, but my feet were killing me. I was running in the Adidas Agrix Speed Ultras, which are a carbon plated shoe, which I'd run in all of my 50Ks, a lot of my big runs, my 25 miler, but they're not the most kind of cushiony shoes, especially the upper is not, there's just hardly any upper in the material on the upper, and it just doesn't really protect your foot too much. There's also a lot of ankle instability. And so Tim was like, hey, your ankles seem a little bit unstable. And I have fine ankles, I don't have problems, but I could also feel with my feet. My feet were just getting banged up. And that was the hardest part. My feet just hurt. And I was like, I wish I had swapped shoes. I brought my Zagamas, my Nike Zagamas with me. And so they had them at the aid station at both the Bumblebee Ranch and then Deep Canyon Ranch. But, I was feeling okay at that point. My feet hurt a little bit, but there was other problems that I was dealing with. But at this point I was like, I need to get into different shoes. So I don't know, if I look back at like what I would do differently next time, I'm not sure if it's necessary to swap out of them. Like for sure, I think a little bit of like maybe 7 hours is the max for me with those shoes. And so if I was closer to the time I wanted, which was like 10, 11 hours, I still think I probably would want to swap them out. So maybe, and they were great for the first half when it was kind of more flowy. I could go a little faster, especially net downhill. So maybe if I do this again, I will swap out at Deep Canyon Ranch. But yeah, my feet hurt. That was the funny part, is like I've never had feet problems. My feet are pretty good on races and in training. But yeah, my feet just hurt so bad. I also got a little rock underneath at some point in my shoe, and I hate stopping to take off shoes in the middle of a trail and do that. So I just didn't, and ended up with a massive blister under my right foot that just kind of stayed there. It was not fun the whole race, but those are the kind of things that happen, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, my feet hurt. Really long section. You eventually get to a aid station, I think called Cottonwood, which is a very small aid station. You can kind of reset, and then you start the second long climb of the day. But a mile into that second long climb, you get to the last crewed aid station, which was really, really great to see the crew. Table Mesa, I think is the name of it, which is a bit redundant of a name. But yeah, so at this point as well, like my feet hurt, I'm behind. At this point, I know we're going to be out there in the dark. And we're just trying to finish though. But I was really good spirits. Like I was feeling very positive. Tim and I were catching up and chatting. We'd come across a photographer friend of his on the course. And so we talked with him a little bit. And so it was, honestly, I'm at this point, I'm hurting, but I was also having fun. Like it was nice to be out there. It was beautiful. And the sun was starting to go down. So it was not hot anymore. We didn't have to do any more kind of heat management. And I was also starting to eat, starting to be able to take goos, which was very, very good. So cool, great, get into Table Mesa, and I was feeling positive. At this point, I knew I was going to run at night, but I was kind of excited for that. I've never run at night before for a significant period of time. We took that aid station pretty slow. I think slow is not the right word, deliberate. I changed shoes, which was great. I thought I got the rock out of the shoe, but then it felt like I didn't get the rock out when I started running again. It turns out because I had a huge blister. But did that. I took a caffeine gel, the Precision 100 milligram caffeine gel, so 30 grams of carbs. Took that right before I left, and the stomach was fine, so I was able to eat again. And that caffeine hit. I think that was also one of the problems of the whole race was I wasn't taking the caffeine gels, which helped me so much. But man, that helped me get out of that aid station and crush the climb. Like I ran the whole rest of that climb. Actually, ran the whole rest of the race really, and that caffeine gel was everything. And so, yeah, I mean, got my Houdini jacket just in case it got cold because we'll be running at night. Did not. Got the headlamp. Got to see the crew for the last time. Got out feeling just positive, and kind of grateful to have gotten so far. And once you leave Table Mesa, I mean, you can't quit. So at that point, we were at mile 50, which is by far the furthest I've ever run. And it was just kind of a cool feeling to be like, I'm going to finish and run 100K. I'm about to run another 12 miles to get to 62, and I don't feel like death. I feel fine, and it's going to be hard, but we'll finish. And so, yeah, we spent the next 11 miles, so I don't know, hour 45, running at night, and it was pretty cool. It's cool to run in the desert at night. I mean, there's cool shadows, and cactus look different, and it was neat. And I finished the climb feeling okay, and the last aid station is right before basically some fire road and easier single track. And after that, some dudes kind of blew past us. I was like, how are you doing that? And they were like, we just got to finish. And then a little bit after they flew past us, I just started picking up the pace. The trail was not that technical anymore, and so I wasn't too worried. And I just kind of wondered, like, okay, well, let's just see what faster feels like. And so we started running about 2 minutes per mile faster, down in the 9s, I think, low 10s or 9s, which felt so fast. Felt like I was running 7-minute miles, but I wasn't. But it was weird that my body just accepted it and was like, oh, this actually feels better. And I'd heard this before, and I've never really had a chance to practice it, but sometimes when you're feeling really not great, you're supposed to try to actually run faster because sometimes your body reacts really well, and it did then. So part of me regrets not trying that earlier, but yeah, for the last 2 miles, I think we were just flying, and it just felt fun. And yeah, crossed the finish line, felt very proud of what I'd done, but also extremely lucid, extremely locked in to the experience. The one thing I wasn't locked in with, which is the distance of 100K. I did the math. I was trying to do the math the whole time to know exactly what it was. And I couldn't remember if a 50K was exactly 31 miles or 31 point something. And I had a feeling, for some reason, I thought it was 31.15, which is actually what a half marathon, it's the tens and hundredths of a half marathon is 13.15 or something close to that. I think the 5Ks come similar. And so I was convinced in that. So in order to make sure I got 100K, I needed 62.3, which is not the case. You need 62.2, almost on the dot. And so I crossed the finish line at 62.2. And I'm like, oh, I'm finished. I got to get more. And so I keep running. I'm the only idiot who kept running past the finish line. And honestly, I was like, I told my crew, Lene and Tim and Kyle, I was like, I could keep running. I could do a 100-miler. I mean, it wouldn't be fun. I wouldn't want to. But my body was prepared, way better prepared than I realized. And that was kind of a really, really cool discovery and learning. I was like, I was prepared for this. My body was ready, and I probably could have pushed harder. And there's so many different factors, the heat and stomach problems and the fueling. There's too many reasons of things that had gone differently for me to kind of regret what happened. But yeah, I was surprised that I ran that, and it didn't feel as out of reach as I thought it was going to feel at the end. So the big question is, what happened with my stomach? That was really the one thing that went wrong that kind of had some knock-on effects, but I've been thinking about that a lot. And there's a couple theories here. And could be none of these things. Well, I guess could just be, it happens sometimes, race effort. Sometimes your stomach just goes, sometimes body parts start hurting, etc. So maybe it just happened. My first theory was that I took 2 salt pills, 250 milligrams each at Bumblebee, and I didn't really need to do this. So the plan with the salt pills was to add more sodium whenever I was drinking the GU Roctane from Aid Stations, because GU Roctane just doesn't have that much, as nearly enough sodium that I need. And then anytime I had my own bottles, I had 800 and 900 milligrams in each bottle. So I was taking salt pills. The plan was anytime I go through an aid station and grab, fill up with GU Roctane, I take a salt pill at some point when I'm drinking that water. And I knew I was going to have some GU Roctane aid stations coming up. And so I decided in the moment, I don't know why, because this wasn't the plan, which mistake number 1, I guess. Let me take 2 salt pills here, kind of get ahead of it now that's getting really, really hot. I have taken 2 salt pills at the same time in training before. That is not new, but maybe the combination of that with the heat, but maybe that I just didn't need to, because I was actually doing a pretty good job at the sodium already. So maybe I really just didn't need to. So maybe that was the mistake. The second theory is, well, I guess third theory is what we're on now, is there was just hot. It's just the heat, race effort. Sometimes those 2 combinations can mess up your stomach. And another theory was that there was something in the water that was being used at aid stations. Sometimes, this is a little bit of maybe a stretch, but a lot of people had stomach problems. When I was struggling, I was passing people, or people passing me and being like, I'm really struggling with my stomach too. I'm getting stomach cramps, etc., which again, might just be the heat, everyone's struggling. Or it might have been bad water. Sometimes the water in places like Phoenix is not great. Who knows where the water came from? This one feels like a stretch to me. I don't know. But those are the kind of the theories of why the stomach went. I still, I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. But I think my one learning is that I'm going to try to take Coca-Cola anytime I can. So I didn't take it at Bumblebee Ranch. We'd done our grocery shopping at Whole Foods, and they just didn't have Coca-Cola, and so we hadn't gotten that. And I was kind of going like, I'll just rely on aid stations, and didn't do that until later. And Coca-Cola can just be so helpful on the stomach. So that's a learning. Maybe start to do Coca-Cola earlier on at crude aid stations. Another learning is don't take 2 salt pills if you don't need them. So that's on me. That was a little silly. And then maybe it just happens. So try not to dwell on that one too much. But yeah, I think my fear of the hip flexors kind of did come to life a little bit in that last 10K before the halfway point. But then the rest of the race, it was fine. So I don't think it was actually as big of a deal as I was thinking it might be. But I'm still working on strengthening the hip flexors and all of the core muscles around there. But yeah, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot I would do differently next year. But it's all minor things, I think. I think for the most part, I was incredibly well trained. I think you can see this with how quickly I've recovered. The next day, I was stiff, but I was able to walk a few miles. And then the next day, I walked another few miles. And then I think it was Monday when I barely felt like I had run 100K. Like my legs were just okay. I mean, they were trashed right after the race, but they've recovered so quickly. So I think the high mileage training, the strength training I've done, the downhill training I did, like I really nailed it. Like I really, really did the right training and put myself in a great spot. The area where I think I'm going to keep working on is just the kind of easy, steady running paces and just getting that down and down. I think my climbing at this point is really good. I was able to, run the climb at the end of the race and my legs felt fine. And so I think my climbing has come a long way. I just got to keep kind of working on almost that marathon pace, that steady pace for a long distance and just getting the body used to that. And then continuing to work on single track, which I'm always trying to do, but single track is so hard. It feels like you should be going way faster than you are. So, but those are minor tweaks to training. Those aren't major tweaks. And I think overall, I did not hit the time I wanted. I was 2.5 hours slower than I wanted to. Most of that's because of the stomach problems, but I think I have to be happy that I finished. I have to be happy that everything went, for the most part, pretty well, and that, I prepared myself. Like, I can do this. I could do this again if I want to. I don't know if I will, but I can do this again, and I can get faster. And overall, it was like a very positive experience. Like, those 30 miles that I ran with Tim were really fun. It was really fun and like a really awesome experience and privilege to running through the desert. And it's beautiful. It's desolate. It's barren. It's unique. It's just a savage experience. And so it's going to be hard not to come back and run this race again next year and try to do much better than I did this time. But that is a recap of the race. As I did for Santan, and I said I would do for the rest of my races this year, I'm going to give myself a grade for this race. And the grade I'm going to give myself is a B+. And that might be the same as I gave myself for Santan Scramble, I'm not sure. At first I was like thinking about a B- or a B because I was not close to the time I wanted or think I could have done. But it was my first 100K. I completed it. I did really well in certain sections, like the climbs at the end. I executed a lot of the race I needed to execute, and I adapted the execution when I needed to. So from a performance perspective, yeah, not great, but it's the first 100K. So if I think back to my first 50Ks, or not even just the first ones, but subsequent 50Ks that were way bigger of a disaster, this was not nearly a huge disaster. I think I give my mentality a B-. I think I need to get a little bit more resilient when things like that happen on my own and not rely on crew to kind of pull me through longer bouts of negativity or problems. But I think from a physical perspective, from a race execution, I think B+ is a really good one. Overall, really happy with the experience. I think it was awesome. Lots to learn, lot to keep pushing on. And I think I'm just even more excited about running and doing ultras from that. And so I think that's a really good sign when you're even more inspired. So thank you for following along on this video series on my road to the Black Canyon 100K. It's over. It is over, but I will be doing more videos in the future. Maybe not a series like this, but I will keep putting up videos, maybe not as frequently, but about my training, about my racing, about what I'm doing next. And I won't cover what's up next in this video, but I will in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to everyone who said hi to me at the race. That was awesome to meet some of you. And for everyone else, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in a next video. Have fun on the trails.